providing help, offering hope, and promoting mental wellness. It's so important that we're all right now focusing on our mental wellness. So under advocacy, we have right now we have pivoted to a virtual town hall series. We don't want to lose sight of the importance to continue to lift up those causes around mental health that are so important. We have a town hall tonight that is focused on domestic violence and child abuse. If you're interested in signing up for that, maybe Ericka can put the registration at some point in the chat box. And we much of what, not only systemic advocacy, but we also promote individual advocacy from our programs. As you can see, we have a lot of things going on, and we have, as many have, pivoted to virtual offerings. Our Parent Voice team works with parents and caregivers who have children with a mental health, behavioral health, or emotional need. They are offering both one-on-one support to parents. I can only imagine, I'm glad my children aren't in school right now, trying to navigate school through a virtual environment. But our Parent Voice team, our family partners, are there to help families one-on-one, either over the phone or through a virtual meeting. But they're also doing weekly support groups for parents and for youth in our community. Also, our education team has been since April doing QPR, which is our suicide prevention classes virtually. They do a weekly open to the public session, but also I'd like to throw out there that if any of you as nonprofit leaders are interested in having us come in and do any kind of resilience or QPR classes free of charge to your team, we're open for that. They're also getting ready to kick off virtual mental health first aid. We've been waiting for guidance from the National Council for Behavioral Health on that piece. Our Compeer team works with adults who live with chronic mental illness. We know that this is a population that is already living in isolation and loneliness, and we know that has only increased through COVID. So we're doing virtual check-ins with those folks. Compeer matches these individuals up with a friend. Oh, pretty. Who usually are meeting with them in person, but now it is required that we do these virtually. So I guess that's the nut and bolts of what we're doing right now. We are doing I'm doing a weekly Mental Health Matters show on Tuesday afternoons with various both local and national mental health experts. And so I guess that's it. So Ericka, I will turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Kathy. And thank you again to Stephanie and Jennifer and Aparo. We're very excited to partner with you for today. I'll tell everybody, put your roller skates on. We've got a lot of information to cover in this hour, 52 minutes that we have left. And I will try to do it justice, give it some time, but also get through the majority of the material. All right. So we all know, if you don't know by now, we are in the middle of a pandemic, coronavirus, COVID-19, however, the Rona, however you choose to refer to it. We know that this pandemic has changed all of our lives in some pretty significant ways. Whether you are working from home, whether you're doing a hybrid approach, whether you are experiencing furloughs or friends and family have lost their employment. If you have school-age children, as Kathy mentioned, you are now a teacher. You are helping with their virtual learning. And all of this is new and different, and it creates a level of stress, increases our anxiety, and in some instances can push our emotional well-being well beyond what's typically our baseline. All of that said, guess what? Pandemics are stressful. Let me say that again. Pandemics are stressful. And it's normal to feel some sort of emotional change, whether that's sadness, whether it's anger, whether it's anxiety. The question becomes, how long do these feelings last for you as an individual, for the people in your home, your coworkers, and what are you able to do about it to create some change? We know that with the pandemic, there's a lot of worry. If you have elderly parents or elderly family members who might be in a memory care center or nursing home, right now we're not able to visit those individuals to see what type of care they have. In some instances, to know whether or not that location is a hotspot. So there's just a lot that's happening. One of the things I want to be able to do today, some goals, if you will, for you, is to provide you with some personal strategies, particularly how to foster some optimism as we continue to go through the pandemic. It seems like it's been 6 months. It probably will be another 6 months before things begin to return to some semblance of normal, if you will. I want to talk about practicing gratitude as a tool. And then lastly, how do we begin to change some of the negative thoughts that we might have as we continue to face this together? So you've probably heard the term many, many, many times that we're pivoting, and this is the new normal. It is. So let's talk about what's really going on with people, right? We all turn our Zoom screens on, we look cute. Sometimes we have on t-shirts or jeans or yoga pants, but we might not share with other people what's really happening with us and for us. We might have a day or two or three where we're struggling, whether that's to get going, struggling to keep our mind from racing, struggling to not have on the gray t-shirt we had 3 days on for the last 3 days, to change that shirt. So there's a lot that's happening in terms of our mental space, and we have to be aware of that. And I encourage people each day just to do a scan. What are the things that are causing you fear and worry? Write those things down just to get it from out of your mind onto a piece of paper can help you be a lot more objective about what you're facing and what you're struggling with. Be aware of any chronic health issues that you already have. I know I have asthma, I have diabetes, and so I've had to be very aware of how that's impacting me on top of the coronavirus, and to make sure I am caring for those health needs as I continue to work on my mental. The other thing is, I know many of us have been invited to virtual happy hours, an opportunity to socialize, an opportunity to have libation. What we also know that over the course of the pandemic, alcohol sales have increased dramatically. And so we want to make sure that we're paying attention for ourselves, for our friends and loved ones, to look for increased substance use, whether that's alcohol, tobacco, or other substances. It can be very easy to begin to self-medicate while we're at home in the comfort of our house, right? You couldn't necessarily do that in your office, but you could have your coffee cup and a little bit of wine in it at lunchtime. And we want to be cognizant of those things. We want to make sure, is our stress level at a point where we can manage it, or is it putting us at a place of burnout? And we're going to talk about what's the difference between stress and burnout, so that you're aware as you're doing this scan and this check-in with yourself. And then lastly, two things that are incredibly important. We want to make sure that we are leaving space to be vulnerable with other people and to allow other people to be vulnerable with us. That's that place of connectivity, but also that we don't allow our negative thoughts to overtake our thinking process. And then lastly, we want to make sure that these stressors that we may feel, whether they're coming from our work, from our home life, from being cooped up, we want to make sure that that doesn't lead to conflicts. And those can be conflicts in the workplace. It can be conflicts in our relationships. Most of us are not used to being in the house with our children 24/7. Most of us are not used to being in the house with our spouse or partner 24/7. And so we're having to look for new ways to communicate, or we have to start communicating and work through any challenges that come up. One thing that's really important, just as a data point, and I always like to give people some data, we know that since COVID has made itself a permanent fixture here, we know that more than a third of Americans are saying that they know that this is having a serious impact on their emotional well-being and their mental health. So let's talk about that. So stress versus burnout. I said we would kind of share a little bit of tidbit. I know many of us use these terms interchangeably, and they're not the same. So let's look at the definitions here. When we look at stress on the left-hand side, we know that there is an over-engagement, meaning that you are going. Even when you should stop, you keep going. I can do just a little bit more. You might have more reactive or overreactive emotions to a particular situation. There can be a sense of urgency for every single thing that you're working on. We know that single thing is not urgent, but it appears that way when you're at a high point of stress. A diminished sense of your energy is happening. And we know that stress can lead to anxiety. And we'll talk about the signs and symptoms of anxiety in just a bit. But what's really important is to know that stress, unlike burnout, has a physical toll. You will begin to feel physical signs and symptoms, particularly when you're dealing with it. On the other side of it, when we look at burnout, which is on the right-hand side of the screen, there's a disengagement where you're beginning to pull back, you're beginning to isolate yourself. Your emotions, instead of being overreacted, they are pulled back, they're blunted, they may be flat. Maybe people see a reaction, they're like, oh, I thought there would be a bigger reaction than that. You're just like, whatever, doesn't matter, it's whatever. You begin to experience a sense of hopelessness and helplessness, where it's like, okay, I don't know how to make this better. No one can help me with this. And as opposed to losing physical energy, it's where your motivation, the thing that drives you, begins to diminish and go away. And that, unlike stress, can lead to feelings of depression or being depressed. And unlike stress, it can begin to take the emotional toll. I know some of you might be familiar with the Six Sigma green belt or black belt term, DMAIC. I always tell people, as you are paying attention to yourself, am I stressed? Am I burned out? Use the tools of DMAIC. We want to define, where am I on this meter of emotional well-being? We want to measure how much of an impact this is having on my day-to-day life, on my relationships, on the quality of my work. We want to figure out what are the steps we can take to improve. Who can we connect to? What tools can we use? What resources can we plug in? And then lastly, how do we use those tools to control? And by control, I mean sustain the positive changes to create protective factors for ourselves. So just a quick review, because I know I went over a lot. And if you're like me, you're a visual learner. Again, stress begins to create physical damage. Burnout begins to create that emotional damage. And we know that there are good stressors in our lives: having a baby, getting married, moving to a place that's mutually satisfying. Those can be good stressors where we feel a little anxious, but all in all, it's good. But these are stressors that can go on for a long time and have a long-term negative impact. With both of these, they can basically push us to respond either with fight, flight, or freeze. And in those situations, you're either going to want to be combative and kind of launch into, how do I protect myself in this situation, versus a flight, where my means of protecting myself is to, it could be physically running, but more importantly, it's probably going to be that emotional distancing, that pulling back. And then the freeze is, I just don't know what to do. Maybe if I stand very still, they won't see me. Have any of you ever done that, where you just kind of freeze? You're like, maybe I'm invisible. They just won't see me right now. All right. So we know with chronic stress or stress overall, there are multiple types of stress. Eustress, which is that good stress I mentioned, having a baby, getting married, starting a new relationship, rainbows and roses. And then there's the distress, where your brain and your body start to send signals of, maybe there's some danger here, maybe whether it's perceived or real danger, and your body starts to react or respond, again, with those fight, flight, or freeze responses. Or we find ourselves in chronic stress because maybe we didn't have the coping skills to effectively manage that kind of periodic stress. So chronic stress is what we feel when we're at a point where 3 weeks or more, 21 days or more, we still find ourselves unable to have protective factors or tools that will help us to lessen the stress load that we have, okay? I'm not going to go over this whole chart, but I think it's a really cool one just to recognize that you don't fall into burnout overnight. There are phases to it, just like the phases of the moon or, you know, all of these things. You will find yourself at different points. And, you know, you can Google this. It's called the 12 Phases of Burnout. Take a look at it, particularly those of us who are in the nonprofit field, those of us who are in the helping areas. We tend to not only experience the stressors of our own lives, our own workplace, and our family or personal lives, but we also take on the stressors of those we serve. That's called secondary or vicarious trauma. And we know that the impact of vicarious trauma can be just as impacting as what we personally experience and push us over into that burnout phase. And so just look at some of that. Part of burnout might mean you're working harder. You're like, really? Burnout means I'm working harder? It could mean denial of emerging problems. It could feel like an inner emptiness. Or lastly, the last step is that burnout syndrome. But take a moment to Google that and take a closer look at it, just to, again, use this as a part of your DMAIC, that analyze part of the tool. So I want to just kind of do a quick level setting here. Mental health is something that, you know, being on the staff at Mental Health America, we talk about all day, every day. And so for us, it's a very normal conversation. But I want to put some numbers out there just to show that mental health concerns are incredibly common, and many of us are impacted. 1 in 5 adults in the US will be impacted each year by a diagnosable mental health concern. 1 in 25 of those adults will have what's noted as a serious and persistent mental health concern. And so again, when you do the math, 1 in 5 is over 44 million individuals. That's a lot of folks. We know that anxiety tends to be the #1 diagnosis. We tend to see the highest number of individuals diagnosed there, over 18%. We know that when we look at depression or major depression, about 7 or 8% of the community. And people are often very surprised to see that diagnoses like bipolar disorder and schizophrenia have lower percentages. 3% of adults diagnosed with bipolar disorder, less than 1% with schizophrenia. And don't let that lower percentage fool you. 3% is still 6 to 7 million individuals living with that particular diagnosis. And so we have a question about, has there been an evaluation of what the numbers might look like in the pandemic? So we know that particular communities have been impacted, just like we have health disparities that we're seeing come up as a part of the pandemic. We're starting to see mental health disparities pop up as well. Part of it is due to the COVID pandemic. A part of it is also due to some of the racial unrest that we've seen. We know that particularly in the Asian American community, as well as the African American community, we've seen significant spikes in terms of depression and anxiety because of some of the things we're facing as a community. In terms of what we will see post-pandemic, many mental health professionals, clinicians in particular, are very concerned with what we'll see in terms of the rate of suicide during the pandemic, but many people are concerned about what we'll see on the other end with people experiencing PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder, particularly as people start to go back to the workplace. What does it feel like to have people in your space? What does it feel like if your workplace has not been reimagined to allow for the safety precautions that are necessary? Okay. So let's talk about the signs and symptoms real quick of depression and anxiety. You can have a day where you'll feel down, you'll feel blue. That is not the same as having a clinical diagnosis of depression. Depression, with many other mental health concerns, you will have signs and symptoms that are physical, psychological, and behavioral. And you'll have these signs and symptoms for a period of 2 weeks or greater. So if you have a down day or two, that's not necessarily the sky is falling per se, but if you are experiencing signs and symptoms for 2 weeks or more, that's where you want to begin to talk to your primary care provider or a mental health provider or the EAP, the Employee Assistance Program that your employer may offer. So some of the signs and symptoms that you might see with depression: increased sense of fatigue or a lack of energy. Maybe you even feel like your body is encased in lead, like it's physically impossible to move your limbs. A sense of just hopelessness and helplessness that you maybe haven't experienced prior to. Significant changes in your sleep and eating pattern, and that could be in either direction. Maybe you're sleeping many, many hours than you would previously, or maybe you're not able to sleep at all. Same thing with meals. Maybe you are stress eating, or maybe you're skipping meals or haven't eaten in a couple of days, and maybe don't even realize that that's the case. You're withdrawing from others, you're isolating yourself from friends, family, and coworkers. If you're thinking about this for your children or adolescents, it's pretty normal for them to withdraw from us as parents. We're not cool. But when they begin to isolate themselves from their friends and schoolmates, that's where you might say, let me take a deeper look. We also know that with depression and also with anxiety, we often overlook anger and agitation as a red flag. Most of us, when we encounter anger or agitation, we either want to fight back, we want to flee, we don't want to deal with it. And we miss the part that that person is dealing with some struggles that maybe we need to check in with them on. And then lastly, we know that individuals might have thoughts of suicide or thoughts of death. Just because a person is experiencing depression doesn't mean they will become suicidal, but we know that creates a risk factor, okay? When we think about anxiety, again, behavioral, psychological, and physical signs and symptoms, and we know that, again, for 2 weeks or more. So it's not that one afternoon you're on your phone and you swipe left on Tinder, you meant to swipe right. That can cause some anxiety. This is, again, 2 weeks or greater. And then you will have unrealistic or excessive fear and worry that something negative is going to happen to you, your people, or your stuff. And you just can't really seem to shake those worries. It may interrupt your sleep. It may keep you from eating. You'll find that your thoughts, your mind is racing, kind of like you've got a hamster or a gerbil just running around on that wheel, and you just can't seem to get those thoughts to stop. And again, you might feel that irritability or on edge. I often tell people, check your wardrobe today. I've got these beautiful earrings on, but some of us are walking around with our shoulder earrings on. We're so tense that our shoulders are up here all the time, and maybe we don't notice. Our jaws are clenched. We've kind of got a tightness around our eyes. Do the scan to see where are you holding any tension that might give you a telltale that maybe you're holding on to some anxiety, regular anxiety, not necessarily clinical anxiety, but just pay attention to that. You might experience confusion or brain fog or inability to concentrate some things, and then you might avoid people, places, and things. And that's kind of normal right now in the pandemic. I think we're all practicing safety and physical distancing and mask wearing and all of that, but pay really close attention to that. Okay. So let's talk about what to do. We know what to look for now. Let's talk about what we do about it. So I want to share with you some emotional wellness strategies to help balance out that work and life. If you're like me, my office here at home is literally across the hallway from my bedroom. So at night, I have a very bad habit of coming in here to straighten for the next day that often turns into about 2 hours worth of work. So I'm going to work on that. All right, so let's talk about self-care. Let's talk about what you do to invest in yourself. Sometimes people say, well, I don't have time for self-care, or self-care is selfish. I can tell you it's not. Self-care is the equivalent to being on an airplane and there's an emergency and you have to put the oxygen mask on yourself before you can do anything else, before you can help anyone else, before you can execute any of the next steps. So think about self-care as putting the oxygen mask on yourself and making a regular investment in your own wellness, okay? So I like to use this tool. It's called the Self-Care Wheel. You can Google it. If you Google it, it's Olga, O-L-G-A, Self-Care Wheel. And this talks about 6 primary dimensions of self-care. And we may have to focus on different types of self-care depending on the day, depending on the circumstances, depending on how we feel. And so here it talks about physical, psychological, emotional, spiritual, personal, and professional. And so there may be things that you say, I need to focus on in 1 or 2 areas, right? Or maybe there's just one that I'm going to focus on for the next week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Under personal, it says, make a vision board. How many of us have just taken the time to get all of those thoughts and goals and desires out on a piece of paper to make a visual representation? It's a good way to focus and have us to put out into the world our intentions. If you look at the physical place, it talks about, my boss is going to laugh when I say this, taking time off to recharge. I'm terrible about taking time off. But again, even though we're working from home, take time off just to recharge and to relax, relate, and release is incredibly important. So some of the things I have in the text of this slide, as I said before, we're in a new normal. Things are different than they have ever been. Some of the things we would like to do, go on an actual vacation, fly somewhere, go to visit family, we can't necessarily do and maintain our own safety. And that's hard. Allow ourselves to grieve that. 6 months have passed and I've seen my mother once in person, and it was from a very, very, very safe distance because I would not want to knowingly or unknowingly carry something to her. But that's a grieving process because we have a very close relationship. Take time each day to write it out. I choose to write out things that I'm grateful for, and it doesn't have to take a long time, just 5 minutes a day. I'm grateful for family. I'm grateful for learning a new skill, whatever it is. I'm grateful because I planted lantanias out front and now they're monarch butterflies, and it's really cool to see. Whatever you're grateful for. But on the other side, if there are things that are worrying you and keeping you up at night, write those things down too, so you can begin to be much more objective about how to approach and create solutions. You'll see the next thing talks about tackling problems. How many of us say, well, if I ignore that, it'll go away? It won't. And so tackling problems by creating solutions or options for solutions, assessing which one of those solutions is going to be the best for you and the most effective, accepting the things that you can't change as you put that solution in place, and then selecting which one you're going to carry forward. A lot of times shifting your thinking. I don't know about you, but sometimes we get stuck in a negative loop around a particular thing or a particular relationship. We have to figure out, how do we begin to shift that so that our worry does not become excessive, okay? And then getting support, allowing people to see our vulnerability, to be a part of our circle, and not being unwilling to ask for help. I know it can be incredibly difficult to ask for help. I'm very much personally a type A. I'm like, I can do it myself. It's easier that way. But we have to have help, and it's okay. Asking for help doesn't make us weak, and accepting help doesn't make us weak or any less than. Three things I want to share before we go to the next slide. Getting enough sleep, the quality of the food we eat, and being physically active, whether we have a mental health concern or not, are all things that help to balance the positive nature of our emotional well-being. I know that many of us are up much, much later than we would normally be right now. Our sleep habits are changing. I tell people, look at your sleep hygiene. And sleep hygiene is not whether or not you took a shower before you got in the bed, but it's really about the routines and rituals that we practice to make sure that we are creating an environment for optimal sleep. The temperature. Science, not Ericka, but science tells us that sleeping in a room 65 to 68 degrees tells your brain that it's time to go to sleep. Science tells us that if you don't eat anything at least 2 hours before you go to bed, when you eat before bedtime, you're telling your body it's time to wake up because you're spiking your glucose in your body. And your body's like, I'm confused. She ate something. I'm supposed to stay awake. So all of these things to consider in terms of our sleep hygiene, the quality of our food. Are we eating the rainbow? Does our diet look like all the colors of the food that we can have? Are we balancing out the number of veggies and carbs and proteins and fats? And then, of course, being physically active in a way that's appropriate for you. So the other piece of it is the ability to foster resilience. And so what is resilience? Resilience, simply put, is our ability to bounce back when something negative or difficult confronts us. And so some of the checklist items you'll see on the bottom right-hand side, again, reframing our thinking, clarifying purpose and meaning. Sometimes we get a little off track with that. Deepening our connection, whether that's our connection with ourself, our mission, with our spiritual body, whether you're part of an organized religion or not. Practicing positivity, that gratitude, figuring out how to lessen or moderate our stress. If your grandmother's like mine, everything in moderation, right? We can't sustain that high level of stress and hope to be healthy and happy. And then learning how to manage our emotions. And that's not the stuff method where we just stuff everything in, but it's truly how do we assess how we feel and tackle that head on, but in a positive way. Structure is an incredible part of creating resilience. Just taking 5 to 10 minutes each day to think, what needs to happen in the next day or today to make sure things go as closely as planned as possible. Creating priorities, particularly now that we are in the house potentially with ourselves, our children, our spouses and partners. How do we create priorities so that each person knows what they should focus on, okay? And then creativity. I don't know if I can reach this and show it to you. One of the things I do for creativity, I do some painting at home, but I also have these adult coloring books. I don't know, I'm just now starting this one, so it's just a little bit of coloring in the middle. But adult coloring is super fun. It's a way to quiet your mind when you have those racing thoughts and get you to focus. Whether you have adult ADD like me, or you just need that moment to chill. Okay. So let's talk about professional help. Oftentimes people say, okay, I can go for a walk, I can eat well, I can try to work on my sleep. But if you say, why don't you think about talking to someone or get help? They're like, whoa, I'm not crazy, nothing's wrong with me. And that's not what getting help is about. Think about your car or your vehicle. You're going to take your car in every 3, 4, 5,000 miles to get your oil changed because you don't want your engine to explode or to burn up. Same thing with your body. This head cannot be disconnected from the body. They work together. And so I tell people we all need that checkup from the neck up. And seeing a professional and getting help is really what I consider. You don't have to wait until you're at code red or high alert or in crisis to do so. You can see a professional even just to use as a clarifying, a sounding board. before you get to that point. So some of the things that a mental health professional can help you with is developing a plan to solve a problem, whether that's a relationship problem, a communication problem, a problem within your workplace. They can be used to help you create those plans and to work through the barriers that come up. Can help you look at how you're thinking about things and how your thinking patterns impact what you do on a day-to-day basis. And then help you to pinpoint your goals and heal from any pain or trauma. Oftentimes, many of us are dealing with past pain or past trauma that we have not resolved or resolved fully, and that shows up with us, right? We've got to work on those things. And then lastly, help us to build our self-confidence and a positive self-esteem. One thing I would ask you to Google, MHA, our national organization, has a campaign that's called hashtag B4 Stage 4, and you see it here at the bottom of the screen. And it talks about that in the mental health space, it's become acceptable to wait until we're in crisis or at code red. When we look at all of our policy, when we look at our national discourse, when we look at funding, all of it is situated in stage 4, as opposed to stage 1 and 2 and 3 that talks about prevention, early identification, early forms of treatment. So take a look at that when you get a chance. I always tell people to connect with, utilize, and be aware of your EAP. EAP stands for Employee Assistance Program. Many of our employers offer these. They are free. They are free. They're free. Did I say they were free? Just, they're free. And it's a really good tool. I find that many people feel stigmatized for using them. Don't. There is no shame in your game for using EAP. I wear the EAP out, I will tell you. You can
Ericka?
use it. Yes.
Yeah. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to suggest to everyone on there that this morning we had our EAP come on our staff meeting and provide a presentation, because I think that we do often forget everything that our EAP can offer if you have offer an EAP through your nonprofit. And again, it is, as Ericka shows on the slide, it's confidential, and ours offers 6 free trainings, free sessions with a counselor per incident during. So it could be if you experience a life change, or maybe you're just dealing with the anxiety of COVID. So I just wanted to throw that out, Ericka, that it might be a good time to have your EAP come in or do a virtual presentation to remind your employees, because I saw a lot of things on there that I had forgotten about that they offer. So thanks.
You're welcome. And it's not just for you, the employee, family members who live in your home. If you have children, your spouse or partner. I know when my daughter went away to school, she just graduated from college this year. Being away from home created some stressors. We used the EAP even though she was out of state, and it was a wonderful tool to allow her to work through some of those challenges. One thing I will say, we need to use this because less than 4% of employees that have access to EAP actually use it. Use it. It's free and it is beneficial and it can make a difference. So that's focusing on what we can do for ourselves. Very quickly, and then we'll open it up for any questions. Sometimes we have to flip the switch and help other people. So how do you do that in a pandemic? Just being willing, right? Asking for help can be incredibly difficult. I know a colleague of mine loves working on cars. That's the thing he likes to do. But if he runs into a challenge, he finds it difficult to ask someone for help, even though it's not like a secret thing. It's something he enjoys. So think about when someone's struggling, it can be incredibly hard. So us reaching out, extending that olive branch, saying, hey, I see something's different. I see something's going on. Can I help? It can make you feel connected. It can give them a sense of support, and all around, it's a good thing. Active listening when we offer our support, I can't ask Stephanie how she's feeling and what's going on, and I'm looking at my Instagram the whole time, or I'm on my phone while I'm on the Zoom and I'm putting her on mute. She's going to think, she asked me the question, but maybe she doesn't really want to hear what's going on with me. And so we have to figure out how to practice that active listening. We can practice it with the people in our houses, our children, right? Our spouse or partners, because right now testing those communication skills are key to lowering our anxiety with the people that we live with. What's important is not doing this with a sense of judgment. Let our stuff go out the window. It's about that person and what they're dealing with. This is an opportunity to avoid any conflict and tell that person, hey, I want to hear more about this, okay? We have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Twice the listening, half the talking. And lastly, we want to make sure that we're checking to see, is this person in crisis? And crisis could look like a lot of different things, but also, is this person potentially experiencing suicidal thoughts or expressing suicidal behavior? If we think that they are, don't hesitate. I know it seems like a very hard thing to discuss, but this is a conversation that we have to hit head on. If you're like, I'm not really sure how to do that, MHA offers every week a free virtual class on recognizing suicidal ideation and what to do, how to have these conversations. So please join us every Thursday at 1 o'clock. Some of the things we want to look for: substance use, giving away prized possessions, maybe anger and irritability. Are they accessing the means? Is that a gun? Is it pills? Sudden changes in behavior, for the positive or for the negative, can be telltale signs of potential suicidal ideation. The bottom of the screen, I know many of us don't memorize phone numbers anymore. I know like 12 phone numbers: my mother's, my grandmother's, and the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. Put this number that's at the bottom of the screen in your phone today, 1-800-273-TALK or 8255, because you never know when you will need to call this number with a friend or loved one so that they can get connected to the next phase of help, okay? So I'm going to turn it back over to Kathy and rest my vocal box, and then we'll open it up for some questions.
You're muted. So I'm not going to take long because I do want to leave time for some questions at the end, but we do want to leave you with some resources. United Way's 211 number provides, it's a great way to get assistance. We know that there are problems beyond just mental health crisis that are causing concern, whether it's housing, financial issues, food insecurity. Aunt Bertha is a great place. A lot of you, I guess everyone on the call is a nonprofit. If you're providing resources, hopefully you're on Aunt Bertha and have your information there. Mobile Crisis is for those who maybe have someone who's experiencing a crisis and you need someone to come out to your home for assistance. I also, at MHA, we also advise if you have to call the police, make sure you ask for a CIT trained officer because they are trained to deal with a mental health issue in a compassionate and caring way. Atrium Behavioral Health, the crisis text line number. Cardinal Innovations is our local managed entity that deals with Medicaid individuals who need mental health resources. Again, the National Suicide Prevention Hotline and Domestic Violence Hotline. If you'll go ahead and switch the slide. And then I just wanted finally to make you aware of MHA's online mental health screening tools. These are all evidence-based screens. You can go on our website under the Get Help menu, and there are screens for depression, anxiety, PTSD, bipolar disorder, many different diagnoses where you can take a screen for yourself, or if you have a youth that you're concerned about. There are screens on there for youth. I know that this is through our national affiliate, and they always send us reports of who is going on our website and taking these screens and giving us the demographics. And as you can imagine, in this past quarter, many have screened moderate to high for depression and anxiety. So there are a lot of people going on and who are experiencing these mental health crises in their life right now. So with that, I think we should just open it up, Ericka, for some questions or comments from the group.
Absolutely. Just as a reminder, if you have questions, feel free to type it in the chat. We will try our darndest to address it and answer it. You'll also see that I've put some resources in the chat box for you in terms of phone numbers and links on the web.
So thanks, Ericka. This is a really great presentation. I have a question. Just thinking about, this is our new norm now, and hopefully in 6 months or a year, we're going to be back to our old norm. I kind of feel like there's anxiety around that because we're so used to, wearing our mask and staying socially distanced from people. What are your thoughts around that, like that transition to our old norm?
I think it's going to be challenging for people, and I include myself in that. I think we're all at a point of what we call hyper-vigilant in terms of who's around me, how close are they, do they have their mask on, where have they been, are they coughing, all of these things. And I think as we begin to return to our workplace, return to our houses of worship, our children return to school, for many people, that's going to be a very difficult transition. I think that employers and others really have to be thoughtful about what that looks like. You can't just say, okay, we're going to flip the switch and everybody come back and it's the same. You have to be thoughtful about what are the protocols, and does everybody know what the protocols are in the office? Is it a phased approach to help people get comfortable? Is there a hybrid option of staggering schedules and things of that nature? And again, that's going to be a really optimal time to remind people about the EAP and resources like that, just to help them work through some of the anxiety or anxiousness of returning back to work. It's a process.
Thank you.
There's a question in the chat. How do mental health numbers in the U.S. compare to other physical health diagnoses? I will say, I'm not going to tell you specific numbers right this second, but what I will say is there's a significant correlation. We know that many people who are living with mental health concerns, their risk factor for some of these chronic health diseases is increased. We know that some psychotropic meds, or many psychotropic medications, increase your risk factor for things like diabetes. We know that particularly, say, for instance, individuals who live with bipolar disorder specifically have a 4 to 6 times likelihood to develop diabetes. We know that individuals who live with schizophrenia, there's a huge rate increase for those who are tobacco users with that particular diagnosis, which can also lead to high blood pressure and heart disease and things like that. So we know there's a connectivity. I can provide some data points for you offline.
That was a point I was going to make as well, Ericka, that our physical health and mental health are so closely aligned, and that's why we shouldn't think about mental health at stage 4. We can prevent a lot of physical problems into adulthood if we address many mental health issues early on. So.
Yeah. The other thing I would share, and I don't know how familiar you all are with a little thing called ACEs, stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. And the study started off to look at health disparities among people who were in a weight loss obesity program And what they began to see was the connectivity between trauma for these individuals, and the data shows that in a stair-step fashion, there was an increase for not only mental health concerns, but also physical health concerns, cancer, diabetes, heart disease, those sorts of things. I'll see if I can put a link in the chat if you want to get a little bit more information about ACEs and how it talks about the connection between health disparities there. Let's see. Do you have any resources of coping strategies for folks living in a group home? Okay. Social distancing. Okay. Let me see if I can pull some things and send them to you directly. If you want to private message me your email address, and I can send those to you.
Is there any other questions out there? I just want to share, again, this is a really amazing presentation, Ericka and Kathy, and I wrote down 5 big takeaways. The first being scan each day and kind of write down how you're feeling to kind of track yourself. I think that's really great. And being vulnerable with other people. I know us, you know, our team at Aparo, we're very open and we're encouraged to share how we're feeling, you know, especially during this time. So it really helps being able to share challenges and, you know, your stresses and stuff with your team members. It really helps. Love the self-care wheel. I'm going to look that up, and the phases of burnout.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I do have one thing to leave folks with, and I'll email it to you if you all want to send it to the registrants. I've been using this thing I've borrowed from, I think it's Stanford University, and I call it the Daily Quarantine Journal. And it's 6 questions. I kind of just typed it up and made little boxes because that just helps me, you know, to not spin out into whatever. The 6 questions: what am I grateful for today? Again, you don't have to spend a lot of time. Who am I checking in on or connecting with today? Again, to prevent isolation for yourself and for others. What expectations of normal am I letting go of? Because we can't continue to do the things we did before. It's a new day. How am I getting outside? Getting outside is incredibly important because that sunlight helps to produce the vitamin D that our brain needs to get those happy juices that the brain needs going. How am I moving my body today to get some physical wellness? Could be a walk, could be yoga, could be whatever works for you. And then lastly, what beauty am I creating, cultivating, or inviting in? That could be gardening, it could be art, it could be, you know, watching your grandchild, you know, just have that sense of wonderment, whatever it is. So just those 6 questions are a great way just to intentionally do a scan with your mind, body, and spirit. And I'll email that to you, Stephanie, so you all can get that out to folks.
That would be awesome. And we had a question. Is the presentation going to be available for the participants?
We'll send a PDF of it so folks can look at it.
Okay, wonderful.
I also want to, again, I don't want to overburden our education team who are super busy, but we are happy to come to any of your organizations virtually and share the presentation. And also QPR is a skill that, you know, everyone should have, the suicide prevention training. So you're welcome to join us weekly for that, or we can do a class just for your nonprofit. So
great, thank you, Kathy. Well, we are almost at 1 o'clock. Thank you everyone for joining. This has been our monthly webinar as part of our Navigating the Current series. Our next one is coming up on September 24th, and it will be on virtual board meetings. And we'll have a few panelists talking about how to handle virtual board meetings.
we can talk about that too.
Yeah, awesome.
And I don't know if Ericka has planned to send out an evaluation, but we'd love to get feedback it helps with our funders that all our nonprofits are aware of. So we would like to send something out if we can do that.
Yes,
Or
definitely.
have you send it out?
Yeah. Yeah, we will definitely work with you on that.
Okay. Thank you again, Aparo, for having us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for your time today.
Thanks, everybody.
Love you guys. Bye.
Bye. I'll
Bye-bye.
see you later, Erica.
All right.
Bye.